Ask Reddit.
What is your most traumatic experience with a teacher? When I was in high school, I got a lot of nosebleeds. Like a lot. So I got one in the middle of class and I asked the teacher for a tissue. She said she didn't have any, so I asked to go to the toilet to get one. Then she said no. Soon I asked again when blood was dripping from my hands and she yelled at me for repeating myself, which is apparently bad. Soon a puddle of blood was on the table. Then I got sent to isolation for disrupting the class. I was then suspended for acting inappropriate during class. She was then fired for putting my life at risk. I gotta say, when you get to nosebleed like that, you really see how much blood is inside of you. Fucking hell, I had exactly the same. I used to get nosebleeds in high school and most teachers were just cool about it. My English teacher even started keeping a tissue box in his classroom. But my history teacher was just a bitch about it. Like, I'd raise my hand to be excused and he just ignored it until I just got up and left for the bathroom. And then the kicker, when I got back to class, he'd make some sort of bitchy comment about people going out of class without asking permission. He was a really good and nice teacher outside of that, so it really confused me why he had that. But yeah, I ruined a couple of shirts with bloodstains because of that. Should have written an assignment with your blood then. I was bullied really bad. Kids kept drawing awful ugly photos and leaving them on my desk with profanity towards my appearance. I had enough one day after dealing with a lot of abuse at home and the bullying at school, and when I saw another, broke down crying and brought it to my teacher. She just Mine is more of a lighthearted, traumatic. In 4th grade I collected Yu-Gi-Oh cards and I had gotten the, at the time, new 3 Egyptian god cards. Well, I was caught playing with them during class and my teacher took them from me and threw them out. I was devastated after all the packs opened and cards traded to acquire them. I never forgave her. Did they ever end up being worth anything before all the reprint boxes? I would have loved to see her face if she found out they were worth some coin. Edit. The teacher was an older Southern lady in her 60s, so she was definitely in that mindset that she had 100% say in whatever she did with our personal belongings. Pretty sure if corporal punishment was still allowed, I would have gotten the paddle on several occasions. I wasn't the only one who lost cards that day. Buddy who sat next to me had his Black Magician of Black Chaos and Blue Eyes Ultimate taken from him. This is like when Weevil threw Yugi's Exodia cards into the ocean. See, it really upsets me when teachers do things like that. It's not their property. They have no right to throw it out. Sure, they can temporarily confiscate items from students if they're becoming a distraction, but they shouldn't be permitted to do anything more than that. I would be very angry as well, probably to the point of telling my parents about it. On a more lighthearted note, back when I was in GR4, my classmates set up a Battle City tournament during recess, which was often indoors because reasons. The classmates who hosted this tournament each had an Egyptian god card of their own, so nobody stood a chance against them. It wasn't until years later when one of them confessed to me that they'd actually printed off pictures of Egyptian god cards from the internet and glued them onto weaker monsters. That whole tournament was rigged from the start. I'm 65, and I still remember when I was 6 and the nun told me to wash my desk and then wring out the sponge, and when I squeezed it instead of twisting it, told the whole class that my mother was a bad mother because she had not taught me correctly. I knew if I protested that my mom was a good mom, I would be punished. It still bothers me that I didn't stand up for her. Why did that nun have to put me in that position? Go damn it. Technically it was the vice principal, but the day my brother died, apparently he thought it would be a good idea to walk in on story time. The teacher was reading to the class, sit me on his lap and tell me in front of everyone that my brother committed suicide. My 4th grade teacher had a reputation for making one boy in her class an unpopular scapegoat each year. Lucky me. In previous years I'd been just another kid in the playground, but within 2 months the other kids wouldn't play with me during recess. One day I refused to go outside for recess. She asked why, and I foolishly told her that the other kids didn't like me. When they came back in, she marched me to the front of the class and asked for a show of hands who didn't like me. 4th grade kids mostly did what 4th grade kids do. I broke down that night and told my mom what had happened and what had been going on all along. She marched into school the next day, got a meeting that included the principal, and tore the teacher a new asshole. I was still stuck in that class, but the teacher moved on to a new victim. Funny thing how self-esteem influences academic performance. My school used to give us a Stanford by Net IQ test for an Erikson. She should really try to understand Erikson's theory of development. That would have reminded her that accomplishing things and receiving praise helps students grow. Got accused of plagiarism over a paper I wrote, and didn't plagiarize, that I was really excited about because of how well I thought I did on it. Enthusiasm fully destroyed. I had a similar experience where my lit professor brought me in to tell me my paper was flagged by the software for being plagiarized from over 180 other student papers from around the country. Not websites, not public articles, student papers from other schools. Longest chain of plagiarized words was 6. I laughed because I thought she was pointing out how ridiculously sensitive the software was. She was offended that I laughed at her. I asked her if she really believed that I tracked down almost 200 students to steal 3-word phrases from them and stitch them together into a paper, which would take 50x the effort that it actually took to write it. Not in those exact words. I really thought I wrote a great paper. Got an A, but I think it was because she felt dumb. Edit. Spelling and clarity. Teacher told me I was a liar to the whole class as she didn't believe my grandmother was a World War II evacuee. She refused to believe me as she assumed my mom was younger than she looked at the time, and therefore my grandmother was younger as well. She thought my mom was in her late 20s when in reality she was in her early 40s at the time. Conversely, had a teacher when I was in primary school who couldn't believe that a student had no grandparents who were old enough to be asked about their experiences in WW2 for a project we were doing. This was in 1999-ish, so not too hard to imagine that just involves having 2 generations have children in their early 20s. Literally got the parents in because she thought the child was being deliberately obstructive and didn't want to do the work. It could have been 1949, and a kid could have 0 grandparents to ask about WW2 for the simple reason that their grandparents did not survive the experience. We were discussing Jean Vanier and L-Arch. For context, Jean Vanier decided to invite 2 intellectually disabled men to live with him and started setting up homes for them so they wouldn't be in asylums. The teacher looked right at me, I'm disabled, and said, "Oh yeah, Vanier created those homes so you people wouldn't be bothering people because the handicapped don't function in society." My friend I left just to talk it out. He got fired a few years later because he did not have his license up to date. Cherry on top, his wife was the vice principal. In the 8th grade, I had a book report to do for 4 books all due on the same day that was way too overwhelming to do at the time. I had some serious domestic violence going on at home between my parents. Spent all my time taking care of my younger brother, cleaning up the house, cooking, and crying from all the stress. It was worth 20% of my grade, and the day before it was due, I broke down and told my teacher everything, down to the time when my brother bled from his head from being hit by my dad, to the most recent attempted murder upon my mom. If I had even received a B, my dad would have beat the shit out of my mom for giving birth to a stupid kid. He called child services, my parents received the call, and gave me the silent treatment for 3 days. They told him I lied just to get out of the assignment. The social worker told my teacher what my parents said and made the rest of my year a living hell. He treated me with such pettiness after that and threatened to call my parents whenever I had either spoken too loud in class, or whenever I was unparticipative in gym. He called my parents for my bad behavior. Home life got significantly harder after that, and my parents told my entire family continuously how stupid I was for telling him. They laughed at me when I cried or got upset about it. Years later, after repressing everything, I was diagnosed with severe PTSD from childhood trauma as a witness and victim of domestic violence, attempted murder thrice, and it took me 3 years in therapy to get over it. It was quick, but it was tough as it was during my university years and I ended up having to take an extra year of school to catch up mentally. I was ready to speak up about my struggles again when I couldn't function anymore as the dramatic flashbacks occurred twice a week for hours at a time. I couldn't do a single thing except tremble and live in fear. I was 18 by the time I was ready to reach out for help. Fuck you, Mr. Gentle, your name is creepy as fuck, and I really do wonder if being a petty 33-year-old to a 12-year-old child made your quality of life better. I hope that there's proper procedures put in place to protect children from such experiences.